Hi, and welcome to Deep Leadership. I'm your host, John Rennie. If you love the sights, sounds, and smells of manufacturing like me, you're in for a treat. My guest today is Mack Story. Mack is the head of Blue Collar Leadership. Mack is a manufacturing guy on a mission. He is bringing the message of leadership to frontline workers and supervisors around the country. He understands that leadership matters, especially on the front lines. Most leadership development focuses only in the boardroom, but Mack is getting his message out to the break room as well. This is a fun episode that I know you will enjoy. So, are you ready to dive in? Let's get started.
Welcome to Deep Leadership. Leadership is a people business. That's the philosophy of your podcast host, John Rennie. As a former Cold War submarine officer who spent 20 plus years leading businesses in corporate America before starting his own manufacturing business, he knows that leadership matters. Are you ready for some real-world actionable advice from John as well as his expert guests?
I'm ready.
The show starts right now.
Welcome to the Deep Leadership Podcast. Today I'm joined by Mack Story. Mack served in the Marines and spent most of his career working and leading in manufacturing businesses. 12 years ago, he and his wife started a leadership development company called Storey Leadership. Together, they have published 24 books on leadership development and personal growth. They have also provided leadership training to the U.S. military, Chick-fil-A, Auburn University, Chevron, and many other world-class organizations. Mack also focuses his efforts in manufacturing leadership, which is where I found out about him. He has a program called Blue Collar Leadership, which develops frontline workers and those who lead them. Being a longtime leader in manufacturing myself, I'm excited to hear more about how he is bringing leadership training to the front lines of manufacturing. So Mack, welcome.
Thanks, John. It's a pleasure to be on the Deep Leadership Podcast today. I really like that name, man.
Great. Yeah. Well, I like your name too of your podcast, Blue Collar Leadership. It's perfect, especially, coming from my background, spending as many years in manufacturing as I have. I think that it's one of the areas that's not talked about enough. Leadership tends to be, big and, top of organizations, but it really comes down to the front line. And I'm really excited to talk to you about that today.
Yeah, man, I'm excited. I'm ready to share a bit about it. One thing your audience needs to know, you probably figured it out already, but I want to give them a heads up, is I want them to know I'm bilingual. And I don't say that to impress you or them, but to warn them. And a lot of people think we speak all over the country, and people think I speak English and Spanish, but it's actually English and country. And I do both at the same time. So it's the best I can do.
I love it. Well, I understand. I've lived in the South long enough. I'm from the North, but I've lived here long enough where I can translate most Southern accents. So.
Okay.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you and your wife decided to start Storey Leadership.
Yeah, actually, we started that in 2008, and I actually started it under a different name, and it was really just me. She supported me a lot and helped me, but it was really just me. She was still had her career going, but it started out as Kaizen Ops was the name of my company. Basically translates to continuous improvement operations. And 2008, I stepped out of the corporate world after 20 years and started my own lean manufacturing consulting business. And fast forward to 2012. And that's when I stepped out of the lean manufacturing consulting business and started my leadership development, personal growth business. And my wife, Rhea, joined me at the end of 2012. And I think she was jealous of me being broke for the last year. So she decided to give up her career and be broke with me because I had, given up my entire salary in 2008 to in the middle of the Great Recession when everybody was losing their jobs.
Yeah,
I didn't have a client. I didn't have a business name. I didn't have an idea. All I knew was I was passionate about lean manufacturing and wanted to go do it at a bigger level because I was kind of getting limited in my company. We had, in the previous 3 years, we got a new plant manager because we were minus 3% gross profit margins. I'm sure you can understand that's not a good place to be.
That's not a good place to be.
And so that's where that, the manager that we had before had led us basically to the edge of the cliff. But we got a new plant manager, and he was actually he was still in the Army Reserve, but he was a a commanding officer of an MP unit and an infantry unit, and did some things like that. And he came in, and he didn't really teach us leadership like I do. He's the best leader I ever reported to, but he still wasn't where he needed to be. And he modeled it, which is the best thing. Leadership's more caught than taught. He modeled it, he lived it, he did it, but he didn't teach us. But I learned a lot from him. So basically within 3 years, when he come in, he unleashed me as the lean coordinator and lean manager, and really turned me loose. And then he turned a lot of other people loose. You may have heard, there's no bad teams, only bad leaders.
Yes.
It doesn't mean they're bad people. They're just bad leaders. And when he come in, he was a great leader and unleashed the people. And we went from minus 3% gross profit margin to plus 35% in just 3 years. We freed up 50,000 square feet of space and added 4 new departments and no new people, not at that time. And it was really amazing what we all accomplished with 200 people, because everybody was going to lose their job. I didn't know it until I actually resigned. I didn't know a lot of stuff I'm telling you about the profit margin, and the plant was about to be closed. And I didn't know all that till I left the company. And was talking back to my plant manager that I had so much respect for, and he was telling me about it and telling me the story. So anyway, that motivated me to go out and do my own thing. And then when Rhea joined me, and let me step back. 2005, a friend introduced me to the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Great book.
I had never, in 20 years of my corporate career, working for multi-billion-dollar global companies, no leader, nobody ever had introduced me to the kind of stuff you write about and talk about, the kind of stuff I write about and talk about, anything like the 7 Habits. 20 years, nobody had ever introduced that to me. So that's one reason I'm so passionate about the Blue Collar Leadership brand is I want to be the catalyst to get out there and help people introduce this stuff that's normally reserved for white collar executives.
Exactly.
For the entry level people, the frontline supervisors, middle management, upper management, everybody. There's business owners and CEOs of blue collar companies who ain't ever studied this stuff.
Yeah, you're right.
Anyway, that's how we got here. When she joined me in 2012, we switched the name over to Top Story Leadership. But that audio I was introduced to, a 1-hour highlight of the 7 Habits, I didn't listen to it for 3 years until 2008 when I started my own company. And that was my first exposure. But I've been reading and studying leadership since 2008 now. And, that's 12 years down the path. And
a deep rabbit hole.
Deep.
There's 15,000 books written on leadership. So there's a wealth of knowledge out there in terms of what you can learn. But I mean, if you're going to start somewhere, 7 Habits is a great place to start.
Oh yeah, it's still my number one book. I may have not have ever read it or even got into it if someone would have given me the entire book. But I just had a 1-hour audio highlight. That was exactly, I think, what I needed. And
that was the catalyst. That was the spark. Isn't that amazing how one spark, one thing can change the direction of your life?
I've had personal transformation. You may not even know about my personal transformation, but I've been very successful in my eyes, coming from where I did. Neither one of my parents graduated high school. I barely graduated high school. So, for some people I haven't achieved anything, but for me, I've achieved quite a lot, especially when you talk about I was in the Marines. I was one of those crazy. I went in the Marines because I was crazy to begin with, and they made it worse. And so I had a lot of unlearning to do after I got out of that to be able to function in the regular society. But it took a while. But once I got a hold of the 7 Habits, I got really serious. And then about 4 years of reading and studying, 2012 is when I really, really started my personal transformation. I haven't drank alcohol since 2012. Haven't used profanity since 2012. Not even the little word. I think one time I was changing out a toilet, man, and I dropped the toilet on my thumb and I just said, damn, that's the only word I've said. And I don't even like saying it now because I don't say it, but I didn't know it just come out. So one cuss word in the last 8 years, no alcohol. So I'm on a mission.
You're doing better than myself. So I'm a former sailor, so it's hard to break those habits.
I tell people when we're speaking from the stage, when I'm telling my personal story, I tell them that, I'm the kind of guy that if I said a 1-word sentence, it had to have 2 words of profanity or I couldn't get it out. But I'm better now.
Well, that's good. That's good. They are very helpful. They're good adjectives, adverbs. They could be nouns. I mean,
Yep.
They're very in the military. I mean, it teaches you a lot of that. So you hear a lot of it. So
yes, sir. And I just, when I got into this space, 2012, I quit drinking alcohol and quit using profanity. And then I went to a day about books that John Maxwell was putting on, how he writes books, because I wanted to write my own books. And so I went and that's the first time I invested any money beyond a book into personal development, and went to that thing. And then I found out you could get certified to teach his stuff. So I didn't have any books. So I think I'd paid, me and my son went to the day about books, about $800, maybe a piece or something. And then we went and found out he had a certification deal where you can teach his books. And that was $5,000 a person. So a couple of months later, we were sitting down there and I paid $5,000 for me and $5,000 for my son. And,
wow.
And, we got into that. And when we left there, I told him, I said, what's going to be my competitive advantage is going to be the degree that I live what I'm teaching. Doesn't mean I'm perfect, but I've stopped doing most all the stupid things I've done. And because I want to be a good role model. I didn't really stop for me. I'm kind of that person naturally. I stopped so that when I speak to you, I can speak with integrity, or when I speak to the frontline people, they understand I'm not judging them, but I'm trying to get better applying the same stuff that I'm teaching them. So I want to have stories, and usually my wife's standing beside me so she can validate who I used to be.
Yeah, that's very powerful, and I think it's really remarkable. And I think as leaders, we have to realize that we can be that catalyst, we can be that spark, we can provide that one thing that we can change a person's life completely. And I really, it's kind of interesting to hear your story, how that one 1 hour audio snippet basically changed the direction of your life. And
completely.
We have to recognize that we as leaders have that level of influence on the people that work for us. We can change their future by the words we use and how we teach and how we show and how we demonstrate. So that's very powerful.
Absolutely. And I share the entire story in my book, Defining Influence. Increasing your influence increases your options. It's my first book. It's like 250 pages. Most of my books now are 90 pages. People told me that book was too big, so I listened to the voice of the customer. The next one was like 125 pages. And then by the third book, I figured out I've got 13. By the third one, I figured out 90 pages, because I can do 3-page chapters, 30 chapters. It's good for book studies. You can do a 30-day book study. You can read a chapter in 6 or 7 minutes, 3 pages. And so that's what my best clients do. But in that Defining Influence, I share a lot of the things you and I are going to touch on and go across. I kind of share in depth in there. My personal story also, but also a lot of what I learned and how I applied it and how I got it wrong and how I got here from frontline entry-level machine operator. Was the first 10 years I was just a frontline factory worker from 1988 to 98. And then I kind of accidentally started getting better.
Yeah. Well, that's, and I guess so. I mean, I've written one book and I've got a second one on the way, and you and your wife have written 24 books. So you're obviously very prolific when it comes to writing.
Yeah. I just got a lot of stuff, man, because I got a lot of stories, and I know these principles because I live them. I didn't read a book and just start telling everybody what I learned in the book. I read a book and started applying it and getting results, and reading more books and applying it and getting better results. And so, I mean, most of my books, actually all of them, except for that first big book, my big book, 250 pages. I wrote that one in 11 days. All my other books, I write them in 5 days. And
wow.
I do a lot of marinating before I decide to write it and thinking about it. I got a list on my wall over here. It's about 10, look like probably 15 books I want to write. One day it'll just pop up that that's the book I'm going to write. I'll have a week or so. And it takes me about 2 days to get the outline done and to get my quotes pulled from my quote files and get everything outlined. And then, fill in 3 pages, something like 900 or 1,000 words or 800 words, fill in, but, write a chapter. So once I have the chapter title, subtitle, opening, closing quote, I get the whole book laid out like that. That takes about 2 days. And then I can fill in between the quotes of each chapter. It takes me about 5 days, and people seem to love them. So, I don't know.
For all our listeners, if you want to know how to write a book, there's a formula right there.
It's actually a lean formula. I mean, it's lean principles, and we do coach and mentor some people on how to build their brand and write their books. And because I don't see people like you, you're not my competition. You're my help. Anybody who wants to do what we're doing in the leadership space, they're not competition. We need all the help we can get.
We need all the help we can get. I think that's why I'm so passionate about it. I think the fact that, employee engagement remains so low, and it has been for the last 20 years, where 30% of people generally in the workplace are engaged, 70% are disengaged. And a lot of that is to do with leadership. And your story where you said you worked at a plant, they were losing money, and one leader made a difference, turned that business around. And I believe that leadership matters, that you can take any bad situation and make it better through leadership. Absolutely. I mean, there's obviously some macroeconomic issues where, things are shifting offshore and things like that. But in general, good leadership can change the direction of any operation, any organization. And you saw that firsthand with, like you mentioned, the leader that you work for. And I've seen it firsthand. I've seen businesses that were losing money that over 2 to 3 years turns into profitable, and the morale improves and people are engaged. And it's all about leadership. And that's why I think that's probably why I was attracted to you when I first saw you, because I truly believe in blue collar leadership. I really believe that our people on the front line of our manufacturing businesses, I've been in manufacturing all my career other than military, is that they're taken for granted. They're almost thought of as like a piece of equipment versus their brains and their ability to think and their ability to add value and their ability to, the guy on the front line in manufacturing has spent 20 years in some cases making those same parts over and over again. If you want to know how to fix it or make that operation better, you have to talk to them. And most leaders don't. They think that, well, they've got their degree, they've got their wall full of degrees, so they're the experts. Well, the guy that's the expert is the guy on the front line, and that's the one you have to talk to. So tell me a little bit about blue collar leadership. Why did you go in that direction? Because I feel very passionate about that area. So why did you choose that as a direction for your work? I mean, I know you came from the shop floor. So tell us a little bit about blue collar leadership. What are you trying to do with that?
Yeah, like I mentioned, from 2008, and I started reading all these leadership books, and I quickly discovered most of them were written by pastors or PhD type educators or former military people. And I think the blue collar folks respect the former military, veterans more than anybody if they're going to read a leadership book. And there's really I haven't found really anybody like me who had done it, meaning I'm not anything special. I'm actually the opposite. I'm frontline entry level worker for 10 years, and I was an idiot for probably 20 years. And, from 18 to 38, I did a lot of really stupid stuff, but I'm still very successful, and, relative to where I come from. But relative to the blue collar leadership in 2012, 2011, I think it was, I can't remember now, but my wife and I started I was a founding president. My wife was a founding secretary of an organization called Central Alabama Mountain Peddlers, a mountain bike association. Our goal was to revitalize the state park because it was basically dying in Auburn, Alabama, Chewacla State Park. And the reason I was doing that was because I had read in a book, if you want to find out what kind of leader you are, go volunteer in a volunteer organization, see what kind of influence you got. So this is where I talk about I apply the stuff. And so I started one. I didn't go work in one. I started one from scratch, and it was phenomenal, our results. Not because of me, but because of our team. And one of the guys I met there, the very first day I went out to a trail day, and this was before we actually started the organization. This is kind of what led to it. I met a Auburn University 6-time national champion equestrian head coach, Greg Williams. He was maybe 3-time national champion then. And him and his wife, Sandy, were standing there with, shovel and stuff, waiting to see what were we going to do, because somebody else had kind of organized a loose group to build these trails. Anyway, so I got to know Greg, and he said, if you'll be president, he wanted to form everybody wanted to form a regular organization, official nonprofit. He said, if you'll be the president, I'll be on the board. I said, well, if you'll be on the board, I'll be the president. I really don't want to do it because I knew it was going to take a couple year commitment, a lot of commitment. And so I stopped consulting every other week. People don't know I gave up well over 6 figures to start that organization because I quit consulting, every other week. I only did 26 weeks instead of 52 weeks. So anyway, I got to know Greg, and And I was talking to him about blue collar leadership. I said, that's my lane. I was just using the term. I said, I want to do blue collar leadership.
Yeah.
Like, Mac, that's what you need to do. He said, that's your lane. You need to do it. You need to do it.
Yes.
2013, I kind of started writing my blue collar leadership book, but then I stopped. And then I wrote Defining Influence in 2014 was my first book, was in 2014. And then Blue Collar Leadership, the first one, I got 5 in that series now. It didn't come out until 2016. So I wrote a different one, and I wrote 10 Values of High Impact Leaders in 2015. And then I didn't even go back and look at what I had written in 2013. I started back from scratch with Blue Collar Leadership. And so, but my passion is, as I learned that, I wanted to provide something to the frontline entry level people. That's my greatest passion. I always tell people who want to write a book, I'll say they don't really know what they want to write or who they want to talk to. And I'll ask them if they're a person of faith. If they are, it's real easy. If not, I'll say, just pretend you are for a minute. If they're not, but I'll say, pretend God come down today. And he said, I'm about to take you home. He said, your time here is about done. He said, but I'm going to give you one opportunity. He said, I'm going to give you an hour to tell whoever you want, whatever you want to tell them, to add some value to some people. And I'll ask them, what would that message be? If you had 60 minutes to give one message, what would it be? Because I'm trying to find where their passion is about what they want to talk about. Then I said, okay, now God's going to tell you, now you got your message figured out, who you want to be sitting. I'm going to put 80,000 people in a stadium who can hear that message, who you want to be sitting there. And if it was me, then I tell them my story and give them my example. I said, if it was me, I want to talk about my blue collar leadership book, Leading from the Front Lines, the one I wrote for entry level people. CEOs get a lot of value out of that book because I've had them tell me, and they buy thousands of them. But I wrote it for the entry level frontline person. I said, that's what I want to talk about. And who do I want my 80,000 to be in the seat? Is 80,000 frontline entry level people. I don't care if they're 18 or 48. I don't care if they're entry level frontline people. That's who I want to speak to. But we've been paid $20,000 to speak to a room full of 80 PhD top leaders of a $3 billion organization from 40 countries. I mean, we speak to all kind of people, and we speak to white collar groups, banks and medical, everything. But if God told me who I could put in the stadium, who I could talk to, I want to talk to frontline entry level blue collar people. And this is the answer. I'm finally getting there, John. I'm kind of slow. But the reason I do it is because these people are the most overlooked, underdeveloped, and most often underappreciated. And I'm telling you, this. I got chills right now. That's when I know I'm saying something good. I think chills when God touches me, say, that's something good you about to say. Because I get these chills. And I always had to say, I got to tell people got chills because you can't see them, right? So I want them to know whatever I'm saying means something. And I'm about to lose my thought, but talking about the chills. But he's, what was I saying? That happens a lot.
Well, you talk about the blue collar being underappreciated and overlooked. And
what I know about them, what I was about to say is they are some really, really, really good people.
Yes.
And when you get them to trust you, whatever mission you want to accomplish, just get out of the way. That's what I know. That's what I learned from really 2008 to 2012. But I had on a few hours from 2005 to 2012, and I logged 11,000 hours leading process improvement teams. A lot of times I went in kind of covert operations. I'm going in where people do not really do leadership, but I knew about leadership, and I get to lead my Kaizen teams however I wanted to. I get a team of 6 to 10 people and go for a week. And they don't know me. They don't like me. They don't like change. They don't like their leaders. They don't feel appreciated. They underdeveloped, all that stuff. And that's where I really learned to lead, was leading these people with no formal authority. I've had less than 10 people ever in my career report to me. I never want to be a boss. I still don't want to be a boss. But once I discovered what leadership is, I saw I had a lot of that naturally, but I needed to develop it. It's kind of like figuring I got a knife, but it's never been sharpened. I need to sharpen that knife. Make it useful. So that's why I'm so passionate about, one of my registered taglines is helping leaders engage the front line to improve the bottom line. A lot of people think that only means I go develop the front line, but really, how do I really do that is developing the leaders, but I also develop the front line. I try to do a holistic approach, but I always work wherever I'm allowed to work.
Yeah.
A lot of times top leaders aren't interested.
It's interesting you say that because I think, I come from a blue collar background. So my father is an electrician and his father before him, and it's a very blue collar background. And I was the only one ever in my family to go to school and study engineering and end up going to the military. But I've always had a passion for blue collar employees, mostly because of my background and where I grew up and the people I was surrounded by. And I always noticed that they were overlooked and they were underappreciated. And one of my first manufacturing operation I ran, I did a thing called Fridays on the Floor, which meant everybody who was in management had to go on the shop floor and work in the shop floor for the entire morning. So we do 4 hours on the shop floor once a month.
That's good
and then
stuff.
we would gather back and what did you learn? What did you what's working, what's not working, what did you hear, who did you connect with? And I got that idea from lean manufacturing, going to Gemba, being in the place where the real value is being added. And but what's interesting is I talk about it in my new book coming out, is that there was this one day, and it was one mallet that changed the entire direction of our plant. Is we found I was working in one area of the assembly area, and they had a mallet that was so worn down, it wasn't even thicker than the handle itself, and they were still trying to use it. And I said, what is this thing? And it's a mallet. I said, well, why is it so small? It's like, well, it's worn out, and we just haven't got a new one yet. And I said, well, why have you asked somebody? He's like, no, we're just trying to get by, because we know we're here to make money and to be as productive as we can. And I was like, well, but you're using a tool that doesn't work, or it's worn out. You could ask somebody about it. And I actually brought that mallet in the meeting, and I said, I was the plant manager. I'm like, this is unacceptable, people. They're afraid to tell us that, that their tools are worn out. They're afraid to tell us that their procedures are wrong. They're afraid to tell us that there's a quality problem. And, how do we change that? And that was really the spark. That one mallet was the spark that changed that plant. And I think it's because we don't connect white collar or blue collar well enough. And the Fridays on the Floor was all about getting on the shop floor, communicating, meeting people, understanding their real struggles. Because like you said, you give them the tools, you give them the parts, you give them the goal, the mission, and get out of the way, because they can make it happen. Blue collar people, again, the same thing. I have a deep passion for them, and it's amazing what they can do if they're led properly and given the right tools and procedures.
Yeah, something you said reminded me of a quote by Andy Stanley. He said, "Leaders who don't listen will soon find themselves surrounded by people who have nothing to say."
Yeah,
and I've seen that leading these Kaizen events that I used to lead so many times. I haven't really done that since 2012, a couple times, but not really. But the people, I build trust really quickly. I got one of my books is called Blue Collar Kaizen: Leading Lean and Lean Teams, and I teach people in there. Really, it's a book on how to lead teams effectively, but specifically in process improvement. But the principles apply to leading groups of people through anything. But I talk about how I actually did it. Like my 1 week events, the first 4 hours would be leadership development, personal growth. And when I first started, I didn't have my own books. Actually, when I was doing lean, I didn't have my own books. So I would use 7 Habits or whatever books I was reading, and I'd get the company to buy them books and buy audios and buy videos. And I would just basically play the stuff and interpret it for them. So I do 4 hours on Monday, which is really getting the mindset right. Getting them ready to forget about all the mess, all the people who treat them like crap, and understand I'm there to help them and they can trust me. And then I would do that 1 hour a day for the rest of the week. So 20% of the week was on leadership development, personal growth. 4 hours Monday, then 1 hour every other day. And we would go out and kill it every time, John. I never had a bad team. I never had bad results, not because I'm special, but because these people know what they're doing if you'll just turn them loose.
Yeah.
And I tell you this, my son hated me from 15 to 19. He really almost didn't speak to me. And when he was 17 is when I discovered the 7 Habits. And then my mom kept telling him, your dad's getting better. Your dad's getting better. Your dad's getting better. By the time he was 19, he heard that long enough, and he gave me another chance.
Yeah.
And he called me up. I was in Texas. He called me up, and because I got habit 5 right, seek first to understand, then be understood, I'd been teaching it and talking it for 2 years and trying to live it. And when he called me that night, he hadn't talked to me for 4 years, basically, unless he had to. And he talked to me for 2 hours, and I listened to him for 2 hours. and our relationship got rebuilt there. I had him on my podcast recently and let him kind of talk about that. He told me some stuff I had even forgot about, and during my little interview with him talking about that. But that's the other kind of stories. That's why I'm so passionate about it, because the impact it's had on my personal life with my family. And that's what I tell leaders, when I go into an organization where I'm talking to the leader like you, and they say, how do we get people to buy in? I said, you make it about them.
Yeah,
don't make it about your company. Make it about them. Tell them you're bringing me in and you're learning from me, and they're going to learn from me. But the goal of this whole thing is for you to help them make their life better.
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
Deep Leadership is brought to you by Strikeforce Energy. Strikeforce Energy is a veteran-owned company founded by a Navy SEAL, and their products are all made in the USA. Strikeforce Energy is a liquid flavor pack that you can add into any beverage. It has 0 calories, 0 carbs, and 0 sugar. Each pack contains 80 milligrams of caffeine. Strikeforce Energy is offering a discount to all the listeners of Deep Leadership. Go to strikeforceenergy.com and enter the discount code I Have the Watch, one word, for a 20% discount on every order. Deep Leadership is also brought to you by my Amazon best-selling book, I Have the Watch, Becoming a Leader Worth Following. This book is filled with 23 short stories on how you can become a more effective leader. It's super easy to read, and most people finish it in less than 2 hours. Go to ihavethewatch.com and click the large orange button for signed copies. Enter the discount code I Have the Watch, one word, at checkout for 20% off your order, and domestic shipping is always free.
Chick-fil-A was a client of ours for 3 years, and Jimmy Collins, who was a former president, I think he was Truett Cathy's third employee in 1967 or 8.
Wow.
He worked there with 33 years, and he retired in 2001 when they reached $1 billion in sales from startup. And he's a personal friend and mentor of mine for the last 5 years. And Jimmy is a good guy, but he wouldn't be interested in investing any time with me if I was still the old Mack. But he's one of the reasons I got Blue Collar Leadership registered. Between him and my wife, Rhea, and Jimmy was always saying, you got to get it registered, Mack. This Blue Collar Leadership is something special, and Jimmy follows me on Facebook and likes my stuff and comments and on LinkedIn. I'm like, that's just crazy that the man, the number 2 guy at Chick-fil-A thinks what I'm doing is right and follows me probably more than I follow him, because I don't really get on social media to.
That's powerful. In fact, I actually included a bit about Chick-fil-A in my first book, just in terms of how they get things right, in terms of, but it's all about people, right? Empowering people to bring their best every day. But they, I think there's a quote from Truett that says, we're not in the chicken business, we're in the people business.
Exactly.
And that's, my first book, it's all about the leadership as a people business. And I use Chick-fil-A as an example of a company that's got it right. They're not perfect, but they certainly are working towards that idea that it's a people business and it's not a chicken business. And I think that there's a lot, if you're working closely with them and you're associated with like Jimmy, I think there's a lot of good stuff there on what they're doing. So in fact, I actually got a chance to meet with the management team where I have my factory, the local management team at Chick-fil-A. I actually had a meeting with them, and they were looking at the book, and we were talking about different things. So I've had a chance to work with the local Chick-fil-A management team.
That's who I was working with. I didn't work with the headquarters. I met Jimmy actually after I was no longer working with Chick-fil-A, I think. Or maybe that was in the third year, but I met him through LinkedIn. I saw a post about his book, something about Chick-fil-A, being the president of Chick-fil-A, and I thought he was a hoax because I had never heard of anything but the Cathys. And
right.
But he was actually the president and COO, and when he retired, not resigned. I might have said resigned, but he retired, and so it's kind of cool. I saw his book. I sent him a message on LinkedIn and told him I'd love to. At that time, I lived in Auburn, Alabama, so I'd love to drive up to Atlanta and have lunch with you or something, and if you're open to it. And we went to the original Dwarf House by the Atlanta airport where Truett actually started his hamburgers joint in 1947.
Wow.
And he turned it into, it's a Chick-fil-A now, but in 67, I guess he converted it to Chick-fil-A after 20 years of it being kind of like a hamburger joint. And so we met there for a couple hours, and I've actually interviewed him. I was over at his house a while back, and I got 3 interviews with him on my podcast. So that was kind of cool to memorialize some of his stories and time together. But they were, I got a book called Blue Collar Culture. Blue Collar Leadership and Culture, the 5 components for building high performance teams. And that book, I talk about and acknowledge Jimmy and Deanne Turner, who was Vice President of Talent, kind of HR. She's recently retired too. That Jimmy introduced me to her, but I kind of dedicate a little bit of acknowledgement in the front of it for Chick-fil-A and those 2 folks in Truett. And I never got to meet Truett, but that book is really how to help any industry really. But I wrote it for the blue collar folks. How do you become the Chick-fil-A of your industry? Because if you'll try to do that, nobody you can compete.
Yeah,
with that
you're right.
Culture.
When you, yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's culture is hard to beat. It's hard to beat a company where everybody's engaged, and the way you get people engaged is by treating them as people and with respect. And I think that organization is, again, no company's perfect, but they certainly are moving in the right direction with respect to people. So yeah, that's really good. And what you just said, and I was just thinking about that is for our listeners. Let me just get this clear. You didn't know Jimmy firsthand. You found him on LinkedIn, you sent him an email, and you end up having lunch with him, and then end up becoming
we're friends, man. Yeah, I called him, check on him, see how he's doing in the coronavirus. He don't live too far from me.
Interesting.
Actually.
So to the people that are listening right now, did you just understand that if there's someone that you look up to, or you want to meet, you can meet them. You can make it happen, but you have to take the initiative. You can't think of them as on a high horse somewhere, but you also have to go into, and I think probably you would add to this. I always say you go into a relationship, right? Not to try to get one thing out of a person, but you go in there to have a 50-year relationship, if not more. If you think of it that way, and I'm sure when you met Jimmy the first time, it wasn't that you wanted to get one thing out of him, right?
I just wanted to hear him talk.
Yeah.
I wanted to hear some of the story, and man, he's got stories. He's got a great book called Creative Followership in the Shadow of Greatness. He don't talk about leadership. He talks about followership. But when I read his book before I really reached out to him, because I want to know who he was and what he was about. And it's funny, I had already written Blue Collar Leadership when I met him. And no, I hadn't written it. But when I wrote it, it was so funny. I can't get the numbers right to get at the moment, but all these years and all these books. But Blue Collar Leadership is really, it's got a lot of the same principles that he wrote about in his Creative Followership book. Because really, Blue Collar Leadership that book is really how to lead yourself well, how to become a high impact individual, which is leadership of self, which is also followership of others, how to follow well. If you're following well, especially without a position of formal authority, if you're following well, it means you're leading yourself well. And so it's funny because I remember what it was now. I didn't write that book till later, but I had wrote some blogs. And one of them I talked about firing your boss. And when I read Jimmy's book, he's got a chapter in there about firing your boss. And I'm like, man, me and this guy are on the same page. We think the same way. And we really do. And I think that's another reason, he's really just kind of took me under his wing, not just as a friend, but mentoring. And I don't bother him too much, but I can call him. It's about time for me to call him again, actually check on him. But I don't really bother him. I don't want to abuse the relationship.
Yeah, but I think there's a powerful story there too, that you can follow people, but you can also have a relationship with people that you look up to, and I think you sounds like you gained a lot through that relationship.
I think a lot of it. There's not a whole lot of people that I know personally that I really want to follow. I read a lot of books. I mentor myself through people's books, and a lot of times I've learned when I actually meet the people, I don't want to follow them. So because they're not who they are.
They're not authentic. Yeah.
I say it sometimes. I say this from the stage: who we are sometimes is who we are all the time, and most people need an explanation for that. And what I tell them is, who you are at your worst is who you are.
Yeah.
Whenever you're being better than that, you may be trying to get better, but you're not better yet. You're still whoever you are is your worst behavior. Yeah. Stuff that people are hiding from everybody else. That's, like when I used to drink and use profanity, I didn't do it everywhere. I talk about being two-faced. I was like 10-faced. I was so many different people to so many different people. I'm the same exact person 24/7 today. And it's kind of nice. I don't have to be somebody different.
That's it. And people sense that too. When you're authentic, people know it and they feel it. So when you're faking it, everybody knows. Yeah.
Everybody knows. They just don't know if you know.
Right.
Then they know.
So one of the things I've been asking my guests, and I wanted to get your take, is about leadership. So what are some characteristics of a great leader in your mind?
Yeah, we touched on them kind of just now, but authenticity, that's number one. Authenticity, transparency, and integrity. Integrity kind of takes a lot of stuff. I mean, actually, all of those three, pretty much any leadership principle doesn't work without like 1,000 more wrapped around it.
Right.
It's why I talk about leadership so dynamic and complex. But the same thing that made a great leader 2,000 years ago or 20,000 years ago or 200 years ago is the same thing that makes a great leader today. The practices are different. The stories are different. Where it's being applied are different. But the principle of the person. See, I talk about leadership development is character development when I talk about it. And the foundation of leadership development is personal development. So, a lot of people can't be authentic because they hide too much stuff.
Right.
Or if they were truly authentic, they'd turn so many people away they wouldn't have any influence. So they had to pretend. I mean, that's what I used to do. I wouldn't use profanity in certain places. I wouldn't drink. Like when I met Rhea, we've been together 20 years now, but when I met her grandparents didn't know I drank. They may not still know I ever drank. I really don't know. But they know now that I don't drink. and I probably told them that story. I really can't remember. It's been a while now, but authenticity, transparency. We were in Guatemala with John Maxwell in 2013. We trained 20,000 Guatemalan leaders as part of the cultural transformation of the entire nation. About 150 of us paid all of our expenses to go down there for a week, and we got to be in the presidential palace with John and the president, and basically the underlying principle was transformation begins with me. And there was a guy. One day I was training 50 executives and I was teaching them this stuff, and I was talking about kind of book study type things. And I was saying, when you share, you need to be authentic and transparent. Talk about your weakness. Don't talk about your strength when you do the book study. And you say, I underline this because. Let the because be something from a place of humility so that they can see that you got a weakness. And I was teaching them that. One of the guys raised his hand. He said, I got a question, Mac. He said, won't it be harder for me to lead my team if I go tell them my weakness? I said, well, sir, if you believe that, you have a false assumption. And he said, what do you mean? I said, you think they don't already know your weakness. I said, right now, everybody in this room, the last person you reported to, could you tell me their weakness? Everybody says, yeah. I said, you don't even need any time to warm up. You don't even need to think about it. I said, I bet you could tell me the weakness of every leader you've ever reported to since you started working for somebody. You could tell me their weakness. I said, those people already know your weakness, just like you knew your leader's weakness. I said, what they don't know is, do you know it? And then do you care about working on it to get better?
That's powerful. It really is. Yeah, your people know your weaknesses, and don't think that you're pretending, because they they know.
Everybody knows.
Yeah, I was telling somebody, I was teaching at at Duke University, a graduate level, doing a little leadership session, and one of the students said, "How do you know you're a good leader?" That was kind of an interesting question. And I said, if there's a group of employees and they're sitting around talking, and you walk up, if they all go silent, then you've got work to do.
Yep.
Right? Because they're like, oh, the boss is here. Don't say anything, right? Because they're not being authentic with you and you're not being authentic with them, right? But if you have that relationship, and if they know that you're a leader that can be trusted, then they turn and say, hey, how you doing? What's going on? We were just talking about X, Y, and Z. You can tell when you go up to a group of people if you're a good leader or not.
Yeah, man. I was leading a month-long 5S improvement event in a big maintenance shop for really a massive company. I mean, $100+ billion company. And I did a month project, and I went in, and the maintenance manager, he wouldn't even really participate. He was not a leader. He was a manager. So, I'm in there leading them. And then you can tell when you go into those places, it's hard to build trust and get connected.
Yeah.
But we slayed the dragon. It was unbelievable. But I'd get there, we start at 6. I get there 10, 15 minutes till, and the night shift and day shift maintenance crews are in the meeting in the office break room, whatever it was where they were at. And they just talk. They talking about, they doing perfect, what teams ought to do, what happened last night, what you need to do today. And, they strategizing and planning and helping each other. and cutting up and laughing with me. And, I'm a consultant, but I had built my relationship and trust then. And then usually after 6:05, 6:10, whenever he wanted to, their manager would come in with a sheet of paper and lean up against the wall. Wouldn't say hello, wouldn't say nothing. He'd just start telling them what they needed to do, and then he'd ask them if they had any questions. And it was silent. As soon as he walked in, it was just like you said.
Yeah.
I write about that, I think, in my Kaizen book. And silence. They wouldn't say nothing. He'd say, "Do you have any questions?" He didn't mean, "Do you have any real questions?" He mean, "Do you understand what I just told you to do?"
That's exactly what he said.
They already knew that because they've been trained to know that.
Yeah.
Nobody says anything, and they don't say anything, to him about anything. He walks out, and then they kind of like the crickets. They come back to life. Then they badmouth the leader, and then they talk about the stuff the leader actually needed to know about.
Yeah.
But the leader ain't never going to know about it because they don't trust him. They don't like him. They don't want to talk to him.
Wow.
So they do what they have to do to play his game, and then they try and constantly to do what they actually need to do. And that's why I'm so passionate, because I've seen this. I mean, John, I went into one company. First time I was ever there, they were producing some little thing. They were trying something new. They've been working on it for like 8 weeks, and the deadline was coming up. They needed to produce 120 of them per day. They were working 10 hours a day with 7 people and could only make 35. So you can do the math. They couldn't make it if they worked 24 hours. So now they had got into panic mode, and were about to start outsourcing, which was making it even more expensive and worse. So they brought me in the first time I had been there, and they was all mad at me. They was cussing me. They didn't like me. They didn't like the big dog who brought me in, who said they got to slow down for a week because they already been under the gun, and all kind of mess. But I love it. That's what I really love right there, because I know what's going to happen. They don't know, but I know. So I go in and I do my little thing, which I talk about in the Kaizen book. Fast forward to Friday of that week, they had improved output per person per hour 376%. And the person who has been doing a lot of the work come up a couple of weeks later. I was down there, and he's thanking me. He come up, patted me on my shoulder. "Thank you, Mac." He said, I said, "What you thanking me for?" He said, "Cause my shoulder don't hurt anymore." I mean, they were doing 120 in 8 hours instead of 10, with 5 people instead of 7. And they wasn't walking 1,000 feet to produce the parts anymore. They walking like 60 feet. Yeah. It was all so easy. And they was single piece flow. They had built all these racks, and they had all these tables, and all that stuff was gone. Places to stack inventory. And, it was just crazy. But the reason I say that is the people were not bad. Like the leader had been there 30 years running that little plant. Not the leader who hired me, but the one who was cussing me, because he had to be on the team. But by Wednesday, he was loving me. And by Friday, he's been my, I hadn't talked to him in a long time, but for years I was supported them, and he loved me the whole time. And I mean, he was like one of my biggest cheerleaders, because it helped him take a lot of stress off. But what he hadn't done is he had never read a leadership book. He'd been managing for 30 years. He had never read lean stuff, and he was blaming the people for his lack of ability to lead well. He didn't have competency of lean, and he didn't have leadership ability. And the people were struggling, and he was blaming them. And I come in, and all I did was teach them some stuff, turn it over to the people, say, "Here's some principles. What can y'all do?" And I'd ask a lot of questions. And by Friday, it's got nothing to do with Mack Story. It's all about the team. And I get in the back of the room, and I let the team put the PowerPoint up, and the big dogs come in, let them tell them what they did. And anytime any leaders walk in and try to push them in the direction they didn't want to go, I'd let them do it. I'd watch the team lay back in the chair and cross their arms, and they're not bought into that leader coming in telling them what they need to do. And when the leader would leave, I'd say, "Don't worry about what he just said. Let's think about it, though. Did what he just said make sense?" And I'll ask some questions. I said, if anything in there made sense, let's take that value and let's apply it. If everything was total nonsense, that guy don't know what he was talking about, forget what he said, and let's figure out what we need to do. Because when they own it, guess who owns it? They own it.
Right.
When the leader walks in and tries to make them own something they don't want, he owns it. They may make it. He may come in and force them to change something, but they're not going to make it work because it ain't their idea. They actually want to make it fail because it's his idea, and he don't have any trust. So that's what I got to do for 11,000 hours, was lead leaders and lead teams and try to get them to work together, and across the supporting roles, the engineers, the maintenance, getting everybody together. And that's where I learned to lead, but that's where I found my passion for leadership. So people who really know about lean in a deep level, like, not deep leadership, but the deep level of learning about lean, a deep competency would know that I'm still doing lean, because the two pillars are continuous improvement and respect for the people. I just don't do continuous improvement really anymore. I do respect for the people and let the people do the continuous improvement. And
I love it. That's probably why I'm attracted to what you do, because I think I come from the same kind of mindset with the lean background. In fact, I think my first episode on this podcast was about Gemba, and I was introducing that term, just the idea of getting out to where the value is at, and listening to the people and talking to people and seeing it firsthand. And because too many, I did 22 years in corporate America, and I saw too many white collar bosses never go to where the value is added. They never left their little bubble. And I think that that's probably one of the biggest reasons bosses fail, is they never leave their bubble. They never go talk to people, or they're never authentic. They never remove that barrier between them, us and them. And I think once you do that, once you take that away and you get to know people, you realize that they have so much to add, so much knowledge, so much value. And I think what you're doing is unleashing that, uncovering that, and bringing all those ideas, all that passion, all that knowledge, and allowing that to change an organization. I think that's very powerful.
It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of insecure leaders out there. I don't care if they're CEOs, VPs, executive. I don't care, frontline, entry-level supervisor. It doesn't matter. People are insecure.
Yes.
Especially, it's another thing in the blue-collar space. A lot of times people are competing to get promoted to that first leadership position. So whoever does the best job is the one usually gets promoted. They may not have any clue about leading people. Me influencing you to do a good job is a lot different than me doing a good job by myself. And so a lot of them get moved up. And so because they had to compete for that job, when they get their first leadership job, they're doing the same thing. They're trying to compete with now their peer supervisors or managers, whatever. They're competing to get the next job, because most companies don't do any leadership development. Most of them do none. I ask a lot of times when I speak at conferences, all kinds of different conferences. We do a lot of on-site training, but a lot of different conferences. And I'll ask people in the room. I was just at a medical conference last week, but I asked the leaders, I said, how many of you, raise your hand, how many of you do book studies with your team? Not a single hand. And that's what our best clients, that's actually what they do, is book studies. And that's why I write my books like that. I make it easy for them. And I teach them how to do it. And there's no preparation. There's no homework. Nobody teaches. Nobody, shouldn't even really be a discussion. Read the book, take turns reading a paragraph, 4 to 10 people, take turns reading a paragraph. No matter if you got 4 people or 10 people, it's going to take you 6 or 7 minutes to read a chapter in one of my books. Then while you're reading, everybody underlines a key point. They can underline 5 if they want to, but when we get done with our 5 or 6 or 7 minutes, everybody gets 1 minute to go around the table and say, this was my key takeaway. And the most important part of all of it is why. And if I can say why from a place of humility, because I ain't really thought about that. I got it wrong with my kid yesterday, or I got it wrong with you yesterday. And then you go to the next person and you just say thank you. If somebody wants to pass, you say thank you. When you're done, you get up and you leave. That's kind of what we did in Guatemala, but we added an assessment on to that. I don't really teach people to do the assessment, but my license and certification for teaching my content, I do have an assessment in there in case somebody wants to take it to the next level. But that's a simple book study. That's what our best clients do. And it is amazing. There's on my podcast, episode 169 and 170 has 2 different leaders in 2 different industries who started doing book studies. And they talk about the tremendous, unbelievable results that they get. And one of them is a CEO of a 5,000 person company. He read Blue Collar Leadership book, the one I wrote for the entry level people. And then he called me up or sent me a message on LinkedIn and said, I want to meet with you. He lived in Louisville, Kentucky, but his headquarters happened to be in Atlanta, and it's actually only about 6 miles from my house. So we met on the next Monday for about 4 hours. I took him a whole set of all 5 of my books, and he bought 600 of the culture books after he read it. He started leading his executive staff, VPs, through a book study. He talks about it on the podcast. They didn't like it on first round. It's like being back in elementary school. We're reading with the CEO, and they're the big dogs. But he said after 2 or 3 weeks, they wanted to do it. And then after they got done, they cascaded it down. They all got a team and cascaded it down. Then those folks got a team and cascaded it down. And now they've bought, I don't know how many blue collar leadership books. And now they're starting cascading that one down through the organization.
That's great.
They're going
That's
to do.
great.
He said they're going to buy 5,000. That I don't know if I believe him, but that they're an airline ground support industry, so they're kind of down right now from about 5,000 to like 3,600 folks.
Mm.
But they'll be coming back because his leadership. There's no telling where Mike Huff's going to go. That's the CEO. He's a tremendous leader. He gets it like me and you. He started out throwing bags on a conveyor, fill up, plane, and he loves the people. He'll get on a Zoom conference with us sometimes, and he'll tell them, "I want you to get better. If you want to leave this organization and you need to get better, we want to support you. All we want to do is help you get better. And while you're on the team, we want you to be on the team."
Mm.
That's phenomenal.
That's powerful. That's powerful. Well, I think we've gone a little bit over time, but this has been a phenomenal conversation. And I'm probably going to have you back, Mack, because I think there's a lot more that we can dig into and talk about. So, but let me just give you an opportunity. How can listeners connect with you, find out more about your company, your books, your podcast? What's the best way to reach out to you?
Yeah, a couple of my top level website is topstoryleadership.com. That's where you actually kind of see it looks more white collarish. It's kind of the generic white collar version. Showcases me and my wife because she's kind of come from a healthcare administrative background. But bluecollarleadership.com is where you can go find out about me. And if you want to sample these books, you can go to bluecollarleadership.com, type in / and the word download. And you can actually, I think I've got about 8 books featured there, but you can read the first 5 chapters of all 5 of my Blue Collar Leadership books. And you can see the outline and opening, closing quotes for the rest of the 25 other chapters. And then LinkedIn, that's really my platform of choice. I got about 50,000 followers there. And I put out something every day on LinkedIn. I got probably nearly 300 articles or something like that. I've got about 200 podcast episodes. Go to Blue Collar Leadership on your favorite podcast app. Should be able to find that, or just go to bluecollarleadership.com and look at the podcast.
I was able to find it, and I'm subscribed now, so I won't miss an episode now. So
yeah, I got to get on yours. I listened to one of your episodes last night. I really like who you are. We are on the same page, John, and
we are very much alike, and that's why this conversation has gone on for so long, because I really do appreciate it.
There ain't many of us out there.
No, there's not, and I think we're kind of cut from the same cloth. And I think even the blue collar background. I always worked blue collar jobs before I went into university, and then the military background, and then it's sort of it's a hands-on lifestyle, I think, and I think you bring that into leadership. I think people can appreciate you better when they, I always laugh at people look at me and they don't see me as a CEO because I'm wearing typically jeans, a t-shirt, and I've got, beat up, steel-toe boots, but that's just who I am. And
exactly.
And
that's powerful.
Yeah. I have degrees from Cambridge University, but that doesn't matter. That's
blue collar folks on the front line don't care.
They don't care where I went to school. They just care about what I'm trying to help them, become in their lives and what our companies to become. So yeah, John, people don't care about that. Yeah.
Can I share something since you mentioned that?
Sure,
made me think something, just like 20 seconds. People ain't going to believe it probably if they understand who I am, where I come from. But 2018, I was invited to speak at Yale University School of Management on blue collar leadership and the subtitle Innovation in Talent Development.
Wow.
And the reason, and we're speaking to a lot of talent development professionals from around the country who were having a conference there. And I had to get on Google, find out where it was at. I didn't even know what state it was in. I never expected to be there for any reason, but it was really cool experience. But the reason blue collar leadership is innovative is hardly anybody does it.
Yes.
Especially for the frontline people. Almost nobody does it for the frontline. And few do it even in blue collar industries for the upper level people.
Yeah. And if you think about an organization, right? So typically you think of a global organization that is, producing products. What is the percent of their employees that are actually blue collar employees?
Most of them.
Most of them, right.
Even 80, the ones up in the offices, most of them still come from downstairs.
Yeah. So you're talking 80 to 90% of the employees, and that is all your potential. We hear that, people are our greatest assets. Really? What are you doing to develop those assets and to maintain those assets and improve those and get the most out of the people that work for you? And I think you're right. I think it's an often ignored resource in a company. And we tell people to bring their hands and their backs to work. We don't tell them to bring their minds and their passions and their ideas. So, and it's really sad. I Yeah. I mean, what is it? The 7 deadly wastes, right? Is it 7? I can't remember now.
I teach 8, but most people do teach 7.
But what's the 8th deadly waste?
The 8th is non-utilized people.
That's it. So a lot of people don't talk about that. So there's 7 deadly wastes from lean, but the 8th one is not using people to their full potential. And I think
not about using their physical ability, but their mental ability.
Their mental ability. Yep.
From neck down, people worth $10 an hour. From neck up, they're priceless.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that waste I think about every day.
Because it leads to all the other 7 ways. Most people teach overproduction is the worst waste. I teach non-utilized people is the worst waste because they're the ones that generate the other 7. And also, I learned this from Bob Chapman and Everybody Matters. If you want to get people to buy into lean, don't talk about eliminating waste. Talk about eliminating frustration.
Yeah.
People buy into eliminating frustration.
Yes.
Most people care less about eliminating waste, but if you can eliminate frustration, you're actually eliminating the waste.
Yeah. Get rid of the mallet that has worn down to the nub. And it makes their job easier. So
yeah, man.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we're going to put links to all of things you talked about, all of your website, your books, your podcast. We'll put that on the show notes for this.
Thank you.
And leaders, hopefully you took a lot out of Mack's conversation here, and there's a lot more to uncover. He's very prolific when it comes to writing and articles and podcast episodes. He's got tons of podcast episodes. I just was on there. So reach out to Mack, take a look at his resources. He can be a good resource for you. Learn from guys like Mack that are making a difference in organizations. If you want to get that 70% of your organizations that's not engaged today, follow a guy like Mack, and he'll show you the way, or at least point you in the right direction. And so I really appreciate Mack, meeting you, hearing your story, and then all the things that you taught us today.
Thank you, man. It was a privilege, and I can't wait to read Deep Leadership. Now I understand you got another book, so I got to get those ordered, because when I meet somebody like you that I really align with, I know I'm going to like your stuff. So then I can be sharing your quotes in my books and on my LinkedIn page like I do everybody else that I read.
Oh, that's great. That would be great. Well, very good. So that's it for today. Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is John Rennie saying take care and lead well.
Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for all you do.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more information and updates, please visit our website at www.deepleadershippodcast.com or johnsrennie.com. Until next time, take care.